beautiful soul family, and welcome to the Walk On Podcast, the podcast where I try to demystify spirituality, personal growth and healing, and whatever else I feel like talking about. I'm your host, Britt Cannon, and this week's episode is called Under Pressure. Obviously named after the David Bowie, Freddie Mercury collab. I've been thinking so much about this because this is part of what I've been working on in therapy, because I realized what a barrier it is in my life to like my happiness, my fulfillment, laying my boundaries, like being authentic. This pressure that was put on me at such a young age to be like flawless, to be perfect, to be a little robot without emotions, to be unaffected by the stuff going on around me, to always be able to be benevolent and giving and forgiving and generous and available, and how this has plagued me in my life and my relationships over the years, because it's prevented me from being able to show up as my full self, to be received as my full self. And it made me sort of attracted to, or I guess just, you know how sometimes you can confuse, when you're traumatized, you can confuse familiarity with like destiny, you know, like you meet someone and you're like, God, this person feels so familiar, and like they remind me of my childhood home, and like this is all subconscious, of course, but like they treat me a way that feels familiar to me to be treated, and like I'm in a similar role that I played in my family or whatever. It's like, for me, I mean, daddy issues. Pew, 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 pew. It's like how I was always drawn to men when I was doing the whole man thing. Shout out to bisexual choice. Because while I am attracted to men, I do feel like I'm a little bit retired from that lifestyle. They have taken enough from me. And also it's really hard to find men who give me the emotional availability that someone who is not a cis man is able to and willing to. And I require a lot of it. And, you know, like being with the girls, gays and theys, really spoils you in that regard, because it's like, damn, everybody's just open all the time. I don't have to like tiptoe around your little feelings and be afraid that I'm going to scare you off by just like expressing my emotions. Anyway, small tangent. But back in those days when I was chasing men, I would always be attracted to men who were unavailable in some way. Either like they were in a relationship, I was in a relationship, they just were straight up dead inside. You know, they, like, I was in a relationship and they were a friend of the person I was in a relationship with, or whatever, like any number of things, just getting over a heartbreak, you name it, I've done it. And this is because I had many men abandon me when I was little, including my dad. So, along with some other complicated stuff. So I feel like subconsciously I was drawn to these unavailable men, because I was like, if I can make this person love me and want me and stay with me, then it will be like I got my dad to stick around, or any of the men who I loved and trusted who abandoned me when I was a kid. And obviously none of this was like in my right mind. It was underneath the surface, but ruling my behavior. And I talk about this all the time, right? Like Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And I was definitely calling that shit fate. And so you play out these patterns without realizing it. And then eventually you have to kind of wake up to the wound, you know, like face it, realize it, name it, acknowledge it, integrate that information. And then that manifests as a change in behavior and a change in like what you're drawn to, what you're attracted to. But that familiarity can be a real motherfucker in your life. And, you know, even the transition between like the intensity of those relationships that mirror your own trauma and maybe even reinforce it if they're toxic, into a place of like the unfamiliar, of like someone who shows up, someone who loves you generously, someone who really sees and accepts you for who you are, someone who takes care of you. All of those things that are sort of the opposite. You know, it feels very unfamiliar. It can feel very raw. It can feel very scary. And it can bring up those feelings of worthiness, that make you want to run away, because you're like, literally, what's wrong with you that you want to love me this good? And all of that is kind of embedded in this idea of pressure, because the unrealistic expectations of the system, of society, the powers that be, trickles on down into our interpersonal relationships and plays out in generational trauma in families. I feel like you'd be hard pressed to find a generational trauma issue in your own family of origin that doesn't have its roots in the system. It's like where I'm from in Norfolk, Virginia. Oh, did you hear the southern twang pop out a little bit? In Norfolk, Virginia, everybody's families, everybody's dads, uncles, grandpas, everything were in the military and actually served it, like did combat, because there was a few wars kind of back to back. And so like so many people's patriarchs or father figures were alcoholics. They were not in the home a lot. They'd go on these like month-long tours. They were emotionally unavailable. They had PTSD. They were dysregulated. And this could manifest in like just being super withdrawn or being really angry or resentful resentment in the marriage, where like the wife was so mad at being left home alone all the time to rear the kids and overwhelmed and lonely, so it just like spirals out in every direction. And it's like, why do people in oppressed communities even go into the military in the first place? Because they don't have money, they don't have access to college, they feel like they don't have options, because those people set up their little tables in high school, super predatory, and try to like prey on them to get them to sign up. They tell you they'll pay for college, they tell you you'll get a paycheck for the rest of your life, yada yada. No, I don't want to get on that soapbox too far, but it's everything is everything. And the expectations of the white supremacist, capitalist, cis heteropatriarchy on us, like individuals that kind of move through the conveyor belt of like life, like we're souls in the universe, we're happy, there's no capitalism. We manifest down here and we're immediately like assigned our social security number, which acts as a barcode. We're like incorporated as a company or whatever. We're owned the second we come here. We have to pay to be born. We have to pay to live. We have to pay for food and water and shelter and electricity. And it's like you start owing as soon as you manifest in the physical. And here comes the pressure. Here come the expectations, not only of your parents and your families of origin, right? Like when people conceive a baby, there is a lot of like hope, a lot of optimism. Some people have a kid and they're like, this kid's gonna fix our fucked up marriage. How much pressure is that to put on someone who's not even born yet? Or they're like, classic trope stereotype, right? It's like the dad who couldn't make it in football, and then he finds out his wife's pregnant with a boy, and he's like, here we go, our little football star. He's gonna manifest all the dreams I couldn't. Pressure. Or with moms and daughters, right? Like a lot of traumatized daughters of toxic mothers will have a little girl, find out they're having a girl, and be like, this is gonna fix everything that went wrong with my mom. We're going to be close in ways that I wasn't to my mom. And it doesn't always work out that way, right? Because it's pressure. I think for parents, this is, if you became a parent in this lifetime, or if you want to be a parent in this lifetime, part of your journey in playing that role is to figure out how to love your kids for exactly who they are. Like to see it as a daily practice of their becoming and your witnessing and discovering who they are, letting them show and tell you, like guiding them, keeping them safe, encouraging them, teaching them, inspiring them, all that stuff, protecting them. But as far as like the core of who they are supposed to lead the way. And at those like junctures, those forks in the road where individuation is supposed to happen, at those moments, you're supposed to just like release in love and without ego and without enmeshment and without control. I think that this also manifests in our own relationships. It's like that thing where you meet someone, you feel that toxic familiarity, you know, you're like, you feel like home. Home wasn't that great, but it's all I know. So let's fucking do this thing. But you don't have the conversations you need to have. Like, what are your core values? Do you have kids? What's your politics? How do you feel about, you know, marginalized community I'm in or I'm part of? Or how do you feel about religion? How do you know, like, where do you stand on all these issues? Instead, a lot of times we'll just like choose the person and be like, nah, we'll figure it out later. Or like, oh, we don't agree, but it's fine. They'll change their mind. Oh my gosh. Kiss of death, being like, they'll change their mind. Maybe not. What if not? What if not? Would you do that? Would you get involved with that person if you thought, okay, who they tell me they are is legit and I have to listen to it? How would you respond? How would you react? You can't go into things setting these unrealistic expectations of like, I'm choosing you, but I want you actually to become someone totally different than who you are right now. That's a messed up thing to do. That's not the verb of loving. That's not the act of loving. That is conditional as hell. And I think it's really important that we learn how to stop doing that to each other. I'll talk about like my own personal experience a little bit. I feel like I had pressure on myself from the jump because like my grandma, I don't think my mom was necessarily her favorite child because I feel like my mom has this like innate selfishness that is not what my grandma really goes for. She likes someone who's like super codependent and enmeshed, although I guess my mom kind of was that too. But I think the way she rebelled was just like a really hard pill to swallow because she just went so hard into like toxic relationships with men and gossip and drinking and partying. And so I think my grandma sort of lost her source of supply in my mom. But my mom was like exceptionally beautiful and she could sing and everywhere she went people kind of made a big deal about her because she was so pretty and because she had this voice. And I think probably when she was young she was sweet. I don't know. I didn't experience that, but my grandma put a lot of pressure on her, but my mom kind of like choked under the pressure. She had really bad stage fright. She desperately needed like male validation and attention. She was always trying to get some man to like love her, right? She was in all these tumultuous relationships. She was insecure about her intelligence and she didn't have a very good sense of self. And that's part of what being raised by like a narcissist does to you, because they talk about pressure. They're so focused on like making you the perfect source of supply or like the perfect reflection of them, because you're not a person, right? You're not like an individual. You're just an extension of them. So when you go out in the world and you participate in the world, you are a reflection of them. And so when you fuck up, it's a fuck up on them. And that's why they have these disproportionate reactions to like sometimes normal human behavior or like age appropriate rites of passage or just regular old individuation. So I think my mom had a lot of pressure on her and it really stunted her because she didn't move out of my grandmother's house until I was 12 and she had me when she was 20. So she was 32, which is like no big deal these days, but it was kind of a big deal back then. again. But I think my my grandma wanted her to get pregnant so that my grandma could have babies to hang out with. And I think she kind of told her, like, you go to work, like, I'll take care of the babies and this will all be great and fine. We'll be like a multi-generational family home and you won't have to like give up your whole life to have these babies. I'll help you with them or whatever. So all of that stuff that was like put on my mom about being beautiful, about being thin, about being successful, about being able to like have a man to marry you and take care of you, be like nurturing, be my grandma's best friend and buddy, but also sort of like surrogate husband and therapist and be there with her through all of these terrible, heavy, complicated, traumatic things because she can't do it alone and she has no support and you're like a captive audience. Just like be perfect. Just be perfect and never mess up and never leave her and never rock the boat. Pressure. And so when I manifested, all of that stuff came with me, was like put on me. And, you know, I have a lot of these sweet memories of me with my grandma. Like my mom, decided to not to hold me first. She told my grandma to hold me first when I was born. And my grandma always told the story that she kissed me right here on my little dimple and that she just knew I was going to be famous. Like she just knew it. And she was psychic as fuck. And I definitely liked hearing that when I was a kid because I've had like this, just was born with this interest in like music and show business and acting and directing and filmmaking. Like all of these things were just things that I was obsessed with in my life as a kid. And so I liked hearing that. But when I look back on it, I'm like, that's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on someone who was born 3 seconds ago. And like, there's no option really but to like fail meeting those expectations. They're not possible to meet. And so as I grew and like became my own person, anytime I veered off of the path that she envisioned for me, being this like thin, gorgeous, super feminine, always graceful, like just takes everybody's bullshit and doesn't ever get mad, like a literal earth angel, right? Anytime I veered off that path, I wasn't just met with like punishment if it was something that even deserved punishment. And I wasn't just met with like the expectations of like my grandma's trauma, my grandma's abandonment issues, my grandma's stuff she hadn't worked through. I was also met with like the trauma of my mother's failure to meet those expectations. And she always sort of made me feel like I was her last chance, her last hope. And this manifested in so many ways. Like the biggest, most traumatizing one in regard to my relationship with my grandma was that she was obsessed with me losing my virginity. I got a boyfriend and she lost her mind. Like our relationship just went down the tube. It was so bad. She was paranoid, obsessed. And she was always like calling me a slut and being like, you're going to be just like your mother. You're going to ruin your life. Meanwhile, I was still getting straight A's. I had so much pressure on me. I was like, my pejorative nickname between my sister and her friends, and I think some members of my family too, was like Little Miss Perfect. And the reality was I was like a well-behaved kid. Like I didn't push the envelope that much. Most of the stuff I wanted to do, or like the ways I stepped out of line, were totally normal and really mild, but the reaction was always extreme, and it would result in these like terrible nights of like hours of her just standing over top of me, screaming at me, freaking out, and me just sitting there being like, literally, I can't take any more pressure. Like it made me feel like I didn't want to live. And on at least one occasion, it pushed me to the brink of like attempting not to. And when I confronted my grandma, whenever I confronted her about those feelings of being like, I'm under such immense pressure from you, from life, from trying to be the first person in this dysfunctional, traumatized, and also systemically oppressed in many ways family to like go away, go to college, get a life out of here. I don't want to be just like a mom and a wife. I want to be like, I want to have a life. I want to fulfill my dreams. Like, I don't want to just stay in Norfolk, Virginia for the rest of my life. There's nothing wrong with Norfolk, Virginia. It just like wasn't where my story ended, you know? And I just wanted and was so, had my heart set on more, and it was so hard to crawl my way out of that. And I was trying my damnedest, but I literally had a nervous breakdown, like couldn't stop crying for days my junior year of high school, because all of this just compounded in like a multi-day panic attack because I crumbled under the pressure. And, you know, honestly, those breaks where I failed to live up to the pressure were some of the most liberating experiences of my life. It's like after that break my junior year, my senior year was much easier. My grades were not as good. I had a lot more fun. I had a lot more free time. I still got into college, you know, I still took the next steps, but I wasn't like, I need to be the best. I need to like, everything has to be perfect. I have to be in all the right clubs. I have to have all the right friends. I have to, you know, do stuff when I'm tired. I have to get an A on everything. Like once I started releasing that pressure because I couldn't take it anymore and I wasn't accomplishing it. Like I had a breaking point and I was like, I'm failing. And just accepting that really transitioned my life like massively. When I went to college, I didn't have that pressure to succeed. I didn't put that on myself. I just let myself enjoy like a holistic experience. I had friends. I like went to parties. I found out who I was. I like took risks and made mistakes and dropped classes. You know, I just was sort of letting it all hang out because I learned that pressure doesn't work for me. And that, you know, I would look around and be like, well, that person can handle all of it just fine. It's just like something in me that can't handle it. But obviously you never know what someone else is going through. And chances are they were struggling too. The truth is most people are, you know. It was like a microcosm, like being young and dealing with that, because when I went out into the world, like in the workforce, this played out in so many other frustrating ways, like something as simple as not being able to call in sick from your job. I can't tell you the verbal abuse that I have endured from bosses who were like taking it personally that I needed to take a day off because I had strep throat or something like that. Just like yelling, screaming at me, calling me names, threatening my job, just absurd reactions to someone being like, I'm too fucking sick to come to work. Like, deal with it, find a replacement. I don't know. It's not my problem. Like, you're the boss, you figure it out. And that pressure is like, you know, there are people who work their whole lives and never take a day off. Talk about pressure, like generational pressure. My mom one time had walking pneumonia for like a year and she didn't miss a single day of work. My uncle, who was a chef for many years and also an alcoholic, and so he was like in and out of restaurants because he would get sober and he'd be like, I can't work in restaurants, and then he'd inevitably be like, well, that's the only thing I can do, so let me go get a restaurant job, and then he would drink again. You know how it goes. He was the same way, like pneumonia. He had a stroke once and he was back to work the next day. Like as soon as he was released from the hospital or the ICU, he was right back at work. And seeing that example, that lack of boundaries, that lack of self-care, that expectation that you're just gonna trample all over your own well-being in service of like somebody else's business, I thought it was ridiculous. But when I grew up, I did it too. And it's because like a lot of times you don't have any choice. If you're working class, like you can't afford to lose your job. And so you do it. You just push through and push through and push through. and it causes real harm. And that's why so many people, I think, are out here like extremely dysregulated. Not only like have they not felt or dealt with their emotions, have not healed their trauma, or even started to unpack it, they they're always in a bad mood. They're like wound so tight that if one person even mildly inconveniences them, they flip out. These are the people who are yelling at customer service workers, who are like abusing restaurant service staff. They're the people that have road rage incidents. It's like everyone is just on, like there's just a thin tether holding us all into like holding us all in a place of sanity. And the breaking point is sometimes feels really random and disproportionate. I think it's like when I think about pressure, it makes me feel a lot of grace for a lot of people in my life and the ways that they were harmful to me or problematic or had unreasonable expectations of me, because that's sort of what happens. It's like as above, so below, as within, so without. If I'm holding myself to an unrealistic standard, then I'm probably holding the people in my life to an unrealistic standard as well. And how that manifests is that nobody feels loved, nobody feels belonging, nobody feels accepted. And you don't even have the tools or the wherewithal to like discuss your feelings or try to fix the problem, because you don't even feel entitled to your own feelings. You don't even feel entitled to your own experience or your own truth. And in fact, you put so much pressure on yourself to be more than human, to transcend your feelings and emotions, that like finding common ground, finding compromise, finding even to like own your core values and be like, actually, I don't think that you're in alignment with me, and I'm not in alignment with you, and maybe we should move on. Like those kinds of things become out of touch because we expect pressure. We expect relationships to last forever, and if it doesn't last, then it's a failure. We expect flawless exponential success in anything you do, otherwise it's not worth doing and you're a failure. We expect everybody to be available and able to give all the time, no matter what's going on in their life and where they're at. We expect just like people to bend over backwards to be like, to play roles in each other's lives instead of just being able to look at the totality of a person, to love the little nooks and crannies and flaws and mistakes and pasts and growth, and like, loving the like flawed human and the perfect source consciousness at the same time, and honor that and respect that, and like not dehumanize people or objectify them to the point of like not letting them just be who they are. So how does pressure manifest in conflict? Like, how does it tie into all the stuff we've been talking about? Well, in my own experience, I have figured out through therapy that, so I talked a little bit about in the last episode, my like slipping into nonverbal ways of being when I'm overwhelmed in conflict. This has been like the bane of my existence my whole life. And if I didn't do that, if I didn't just like shut down and not be able to speak, then I would cry, especially if I was angry. And maybe people out there will resonate with this, but there is nothing more infuriating than when you are like hopping mad, like pissed the fuck off, and all you want to do is like tell someone off and yell at them, and all you can do is cry to the point of like nobody's able to understand the words that are coming out of your mouth because you're just sobbing through it. So frustrating. And then a lot of times if you're dealing with like someone who's misogynistic or someone who thinks that they're really logical, but actually they're just dead inside or whatever, as soon as you cry, it's like you've lost. Like you've lost all credibility, and you have no room to like argue anymore, because you're just either using tears as a weapon or like, look at you, you're so illogical or dysregulated, or you're too emotional or too sensitive or whatever. And that like discredits you as a person with needs and feelings and like a full world of experience within themselves, that in order to be loved and feel loved, you need people to understand and like respect and see, and allow space for that. So the reason, I mean, I think being overwhelmed and overstimulated and triggered is like a good enough reason to kind of experience a shutdown like that. But I think there's another layer of like pressure. And it comes from like my expectation of myself, because this is the expectation that was put on me by my caregivers when I was a kid. Like, I'm not allowed to get angry. I am never, ever, ever allowed to be angry. Anger is unbecoming. It is petty. It is not gracious. And it is like not available to me. I am not allowed to be resentful. Resentment is ugly. Resentment means you don't want to give to people. You don't want to take care of people. You don't want to nurture people. You don't know how to love. I'm not allowed to be jealous. Jealousy is unbecoming. It's a sign of weakness. It is admission that you have insecurities, that you're like able to feel threatened, or like you're just giving someone power over you. Same thing with being like failing. I'm not allowed to experience failure. I'm not allowed to make a mistake. If I make a mistake, it's the end of the world, because I'm supposed to be perfect. And whoever's around me is allowed to like treat me any type of way, because whoopsie, turns out I'm not perfect. I'm not allowed to have needs. I'm not allowed to ask anyone for anything. If I go through something hard, I can handle it on my own. Like, I struggle by myself. I've even had moments where it's like, I'm not allowed to feel grief, that like I have to be the strong one in the room at all times. And if it does creep up, it can only happen when I'm alone and when no one needs me. And then, even more sinister levels of it, where like I'm not allowed to admit I'm being mistreated or abused. Like, I'm not allowed to ever see the bad in people, even though they seem to only ever see the bad in me. It is up to me to not only preserve the reputation of our connection, but preserve their reputation as an individual too. Like, I'm not allowed to only be responsible for myself. I have to be responsible for everyone in my vicinity. And, and it brushes up against my passion and my purpose of like being here to be a helper, being someone who understands emotions and trauma and spirituality, and can like hold space for people who are in really deep, dark places, and isn't afraid to like sit in there with them and help them transmute it. Like, I don't mind when people call me crying. I don't mind people asking for my help. I have been like, if you need help moving, I will help you move. If you need a friend to talk to anytime, I will talk to you. Like, I love being that person. I love being there for the people that I love. I think like acts of service is a big love language for me in the way that I give love. I love to show up for people and be there for people and be in people's lives. And that's because I'm like meant to be a helper. But sometimes that pressure brushes up against that impulse, or that, those gifts. And it makes you feel like you're not allowed to have a life outside of that role, or you're not allowed to struggle, or that like if you find yourself in a bad relationship or failing at something or doing a bad job or making a mistake, then everything good you've ever thought about yourself isn't true. Like, now you're a liar. This is sort of the black and white thinking when you're dealing with a toxic person that is so frustrating. It's like, I had this friend who was very demanding, and she was a little bit of an alcoholic, and we were super enmeshed and so codependent, and also sort of like queer platonic in that way that happens sometimes with like closeted, like women, closeted queer women sort of thing, where like it's really intense, but you swear you're straight. But she was so demanding, and I like lived my life to serve her. If she needed me at 3 a.m. to pick her up from her mom's because they had a fight, I went to do it. If she needed me to like lay in bed with her all day because her boyfriend was at work, I would do it. Like, there all the time. And the few times, I could count on one hand the times in our many years long friendship that I couldn't show up for her the second she demanded it, I would be like hit with a barrage of like, you're a terrible friend, you're a bad person, like you don't love me, you're so selfish. And I would think like, the list of things that I've done for you and the ways I've been a good friend to you, I don't even think this counts as something that makes me a bad friend. But if we're going to just we're just going to live in your reality for a second, even if that were true, the list of good I'd done in your life is so much longer than this list of like 3 or 4 times when I had a life of my own and I couldn't come through for you. Like, call someone else. Deal with it yourself. But those like double standards and expectations and that pressure brushed up against this thing of my integrity of like, I want to be helpful. I want to be there for people. I want to show the people I love that I love them. And for people to like push on those buttons and apply that pressure in the way that like struck that wound or like that nerve, it was a very good and effective way to manipulate me for a very long time. And that can be so hard to unpack because it's like, it's not pressure. Like, inherently being there for someone is not pressure. Taking care of someone is not pressure. Having conflict is not pressure. Having expectations even isn't pressure. It's like, if I'm in a relationship with you, I expect you to be able to process your feelings and emotions and conflict with me. That's not pressure. That's just like what I need to feel safe. And like I'm growing in a relationship. This microphone just keeps falling down. And so there's like nuance to it. There's nuance to everything. But pressure is like unrealistic. If you're looking for who's applying the pressure in your life, look for the people who have expectations of you that you could never possibly in 1,000 lifetimes meet. And that's usually your sign that something is up. So anyway, I was dealing with the sort of triggering experience of being like a caretaker to my partner when she's going through these really intense like health situations. And I was expecting myself, putting pressure on myself that was very familiar from my childhood to like be her everything, to drop whatever I needed to drop, to take care of her, to not rely on anyone else because we both have a hard time with that, and to not make like I was afraid that me asking for something would just be the thing that was too much for her. And advocating for myself in general has always been really hard because anytime I did it as a kid, I was like, I got either brutally rejected or punished, and so it's hard for me to do anyway. And I just expected myself to be like able to give that much all the time without burning out, without feeling like tired or resentful or, just overburdened or whatever. I just expected myself to be able to give and give and give and give without taking care of myself at all. And I realized in therapy that anytime I was struggling with one of those negative emotions, like I'm feeling really burnt out and I'm feeling like I don't have as much to give, and every time I have to give from this place, I start to get resentful, And then I would feel so guilty, and I'd be like, God, I'm a terrible person. I don't know how to love. I don't know how to do who would even want to be in a relationship with someone like me? Like the spiral starts happening. And then my therapist was like, why are you having shame about like being overwhelmed? Or like, why are you having shame about being tired? Why are you having shame about needing space or needing to lay a boundary? Or even something as simple as like, I just wanted to go to the beach. I just really wanted to like be in the water, zone out, meditate, and just have like a day to myself once in a while. And it was like I would have the desire, and almost immediately I would like shut it down and be like, you can't have that. Pressure. And when she asked me that, I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know why I feel all this pressure to have no needs or no feelings. Like, I just feel like everybody else gets to have them and I don't. I don't know. Like, I don't know. It just upsets me. And so we've been like working on it and unpacking it. And I've been noticing like it is in everything. It is in everything I do, this pressure and expectation. And there were so many years where like recording music or performing or being in love or writing something, like everything I tried to do felt so heavy. And I was working with like 30% battery as it was because of like chronic health conditions, because of being in a lot of toxic relationships at the same time, because of dealing with my family. Like there was a lot going on. And so I was really running on 30% on a good day. And you throw one of those feelings or experiences or rejections or just pressure on top of it, and it would just deplete me so bad, so that when it came time to do something that I like actually enjoyed, I would be working with like 2%. And then the pressure that I put on myself would make it almost impossible to create anything. Like I would do it. I would have like these bursts of like working on it for 12 hours and like forcing myself to push through. And then I would take like 6 months off, which made consistency impossible. Same thing with relationships, right? Like I would show up as this like perfect, like super nurturing Stepford wife. Like, I'll do your laundry, I'll cook your meals, I'll feel your feelings for you, I'll fucking help you process all this shit, I'll get you right back on track, I will know where everything is all the time, like you can count on me. And then as the relationship sort of reached 3-4 years in, I'd start to be like, oh God, I have needs, I have desires, I'm not fulfilled in this, like this person doesn't treat me like a whole person. And then I would start to try to correct it. By then it was too little too late, right? Like the dynamic has been established, and it's so hard to like switch a dynamic from an unhealthy one to a healthy one. And when you've like manifested people who mirror that childhood trauma of like, you don't get to have needs, you're here to serve me, like you are an extension of me, you're the friend who makes me laugh, you're the friend who pays for my shit, you're the friend who whatever, that's all it is you're just like, you serve a purpose for this person. If you've attracted those kinds of people, those are the situations you're in, then it becomes nearly impossible to like switch out of that, because your discernment wasn't in place when you entered into those situations. So you weren't like vetting people. You didn't know that like, I need someone who's malleable enough to like take feedback when I give it to them, or I need someone who knows how to receive a boundary without being a fucking asshole. Or, if I need to make a change in my life, then I need to be with someone who won't talk me out of it every time because it's good for me but challenging for them or whatever. And that's usually what would happen. But anyway, through like these past few months, learning how to release the pressure, everything has become easier. Like conflict has become so much easier. Worry, like all of my negative emotions, I still have them, but I trust that they're going to pass, because I'm not having, like, the emotions happen, but I'm not having the same reaction to them that I used to. I'm not thinking about them and perceiving them the way I was before. So it's like, if jealousy comes up, I'm like, oh God, here's fucking jealousy again. Like, it's going to scare the shit out of me. I'm like, I'm going to sit in this discomfort. But I'm not like, oh my God, I'm such a terrible person. Like, I shouldn't be feeling this. I should be like able to handle this. You know, like, I can't let anybody see that I'm feeling this. Never mind ask for reassurance, which is one of the antidotes to jealousy. You know, pressure is making me feel shame about totally normal human emotions. Same thing with like, I need to lay a boundary. Like, I'm feeling resentful and I feel like I need to say something to like course correct this situation so it doesn't go down an unhealthy path. And I don't like who I am when I'm resentful. So let's deal with this. Having like, that's just like the direct, you know, like you have the feeling, you're like, I know what this is and I know what to do to like remedy it, even if it's just like ride it out until it's over. Instead, like before, I would have all these reactions to it, and it would make me feel like it was like a failure of my character to have a feeling like that. And so sometimes what happens is people have the feeling, they feel the shame, and then they do anything they can to get out of shame. They'll deny it's there, they'll try to numb it, they'll run away from it. It's like those people who have that pattern of like, I'm going to leave you before you leave me. Like, they feel the abandonment issue come up when it starts to get intimate, and then they're like, nope. I know you're just going to hurt me and destroy me and crush my heart, and so I'm going to get out of here and do it to you before you can do it to me, because at least then I feel like it was my choice and I had the power. That pressure is like unbearable, and it makes everything so heavy. And since then, it's like yesterday, I think it was yesterday. Yesterday I got a gig that I like sort of auditioned for to be a figure model at this place called the New School in New York. So I got that job. Literally 2 hours later, I got a notice that my student loan was going to have to start getting paid again. And in my previous life, in my previous way of being, that would have sent me into a panic attack. I would have been like, life is not fair. I'm a failure. Like, I haven't figured my life out yet. I'm never going to have money. I'm never going to be successful. I'm never going to do the things I want to do. Like, because something is inherently wrong with me. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable enough, you know, spiral. And yesterday I was just like, that's funny timing, and let it go, right? It's just, there's a lightness when you start to release the pressure. The tarot cards that I was thinking of when I was thinking about this are like the 9 and the 10 of wands. The 5 of wands is like all these figures sort of like sword fighting with these wands, like they're like LARPing, play pretending with these wands, and they're in conflict, but they're sort of enjoying themselves. They're like having fun. The 6 of wands is like a victory. So like when you're when you're energetic and passionate and playing and inspired, like it often leads to victory. And then when we get to the 7 of wands, there's like a person on the higher ground, and he's sort of like fighting with, you would imagine those same 5 of wands figures like beneath him, but he's got the higher ground, so he's got the advantage. And there's sort of this vibe of like, you put in the practice of navigating conflict and learning how to take action and advocating for yourself and stuff. So you've been elevated to a safer place. And when you interact with these people, they're like not on your level, or you're so protected by your own boundaries and sense of self and ability to take action and stand up for yourself and all that they can't really touch you. You can engage with it without being like fully immersed in it. The 8 of wands is just like some wands flying through the air disembodied. So you imagine someone throwing them or something. Or I've seen people describe it as like Cupid's arrows. Just wands flying through the air for no reason. There's confirmation in the horn beeping outside. And then the 9 of wands is this guy who's got like a bandage on his head, and he's got all these wands planted in the ground, and he's holding one in sort of a defensive position. But my guy looks tired. Right? He looks tired. He has been through it. He's been fighting for a long time, and he is exhausted. And then you come to the 10 of wands, which has always been one of my favorite cards. Back in my old, more codependent life, I would pull it constantly. Every time I gave myself a reading, it was like, oh boy, here comes the 10 of wands. And it's about pressure. it's about being overburdened. It's this figure who's carrying these 10 wands and his like back is bent. He's exhausted. Like this burden is too much for him to carry. And if you get it upright, it's like, you're overburdened right now. If you get it in reversed, it's like, drop those fucking wands. And I always tell people when they get this card, like, you need a break. You're feeling overwhelmed, overburdened, you're carrying too much. And you either need to put all those burdens down, sit down on this little rock and take a rest, and then you can carry on when you feel a little better. Or you can just drop all of them and not pick them up again. And like getting to where you're going will feel so much easier and lighter because you're not carrying all these burdens. And that is the journey of pressure for me. I was carrying like the failures of my mother, the pressure that her mother put onto her, that her mother put onto her, that her mother put onto her, all the way back to like who even knows when. And those are burdens I didn't ask to carry. I didn't come here. I mean, cosmically maybe, but in this lifetime, I didn't consent to these expectations. I didn't consent to this pressure. I was just coming here to be my weird little imperfect self. And somebody else's expectations and pressure is not really my problem. If I convene with someone and I love them and care about them and they have certain needs or desires or whatever that I choose to fill to like continue our relationship, and because everybody brings something to the table, right? If it's like aligned with where I'm at, what I feel, what I need, what makes me happy, then I'm so overjoyed to do it. It's not to say like, fuck everybody, you don't need to help anybody, you don't owe anybody anything, because I think that mentality is dangerous in a different way. But what about just be? Like, what about just be who you are and just be? Just live your life. Just flow where you need to. If you should dance up to somebody and like flow with them for a while, beautiful. Like, just lay off ourselves, ease up the pressure, and then ease the pressure off of each other. Just let everybody be. Let's rethink this like paradigm of how we relate to each other. And instead, like I was talking about with parents and children, like what if we just let each other be who we are, and we look at relating to one another as simply a process of discovering who the other person is. I feel like I even do this with myself. Like I discover who I am every day. There's always layers and levels to explore. And I have come to see that exploration as like so joyful and so magical and so healing. And it's one of my like passions in my life to get to know myself. And when I can, convene with someone else and I can see them discovering themselves and I can be sort of a witness to that journey. I can mirror back the growth and changes I've seen in them. They do the same for me, and we validate each other's like growth and experiences. Then that's the gift that keeps on giving. Then everybody feels belonging. Everybody feels safe enough to have conflict in an open and honest and like loving way. Nobody's afraid that anybody's like trampling on each other's boundaries or keeping each other stuck or trying to be controlling or putting too much pressure. I think in my own experience, like working on this wound, releasing these expectations has made life feel so much more fun. It's like I am starting to remember that I just love making music, that it makes me so happy. I love being in a relationship. I love like the day-to-day. I love loving on someone. I love taking care of someone. I love being taken care of. I love sharing like meals and my day and experiences. I love having friends. I love having community. I love socializing. I mean, I feel like my whole life I've had this intense social anxiety because my mom and my grandma both, and I think this was something my mom learned from my grandma, would love to work me up into a panic attack, like as I was getting ready to do something. It's like the school dance, my graduation, like a book report, it didn't matter. If I was about to do something important for me, they would pick a fight with me, usually over choosing something to wear, which was so like traumatizing. Cause I just was, I was chubby and like I had all these sensory issues with different fabrics, and my mom could never understand like why I wouldn't wear certain things or why I couldn't just like throw something on and get out the door. It was always like a long, drawn out kind of dramatic process, but it's like I had a lot of needs. I didn't know how to express them because nobody, explored me enough to know the type of person I was or what kind of limitations I had or why I was having these reactions to certain things. So I would get worked up into a panic attack, and then I think that eventually sort of became social anxiety, because anytime I was getting ready to go do something, I would get triggered and everything felt so overwhelming. And the other day, I've always said that I am like a wonderful performer. Like I've literally never given a bad performance. I always give the people what they want, but I've always bombed auditions. It's been like, I get such bad stage fright my whole life. If I had to audition for something and it wasn't just a formality, because a lot of times this thing would happen where like I would get cast and stuff because someone would be like, you're perfect for this. You have to audition, but like you're going to get it. Unless it was like that, I would freak out. I would choke, like it wouldn't go well. So like this cosmically hilarious and ironic things, like I had an audition to be in the Rocky Horror Picture Show in college, and the day of my audition, I was taking the trash out. I fell down the steps and broke my ankle. Like stuff like that where you're like, that's not technically self-sabotage, but it was something sabotage. But they used to feel so heavy and so scary. And like when I was in there and they'd be interviewing me and stuff, I'd be like stuttering and stumbling over my words and not being able to think. And so last week when I went on the casting call for this figure modeling gig, I was sitting there and I was like feeling all of that. And I was like, everybody here is skinny except for me. And like, clearly they want someone skinny and I'm not what they're looking for. And like, how can I make myself appealing? Like, what do I have to say? How do I, I was just sitting there like spiraling about going in this room and having this audition and, just having the same old stuff come up again. And then I had this like light bulb moment where I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just went in there and like was my full, weird, vulnerable self. And let me tell you, I went in that room and I shined my little light so brightly that they were like hanging on my every word. They were like so into everything I was saying. And it's because like I'm meant to have this job, like I'm good at it. Every time I've done it, I get rave reviews. Like it's something that I'm good at, laying super still and being drawn. And also like, I get it. Like I get the process, I get the collaboration, I get like how fun it is. I just truly enjoy it. I'm good at meditation, which is something it requires because it takes so much focus to sit perfectly still. And like we all clicked, and I was on the way home and I was thinking like magic happens when you release pressure. Like you're capable of things you didn't even realize when you release pressure. When you just allow yourself to like breathe and be in the moment, when you can drop those 10 wands and just walk the fuck away. Like you're so much lighter, you can move so much faster, you can get so much further. And also like how you treat yourself is how you treat everyone around you. If you know someone who's like hypercritical of all the people around them, you can guarantee that in their head, they are 10 times worse. And I think this is one of those things that like, if we could figure it out, we could all convene on like a higher vibration. We could raise our kids. I don't have any kids, but you know what I mean. Collectively raise the children of the world with like less pressure and more freedom and more authenticity. People could be more open-hearted with each other. They could give more generously. They could not always have to be thinking about like how to win. God, like just release that. Just be like, I don't care. I just want to live. I just want to experience. I just want to connect, and like keep it simple, silly. KISS. I always say silly because I think stupid is mean. Keep it simple, silly. The best thing you can do for yourself is figure out where your pressure is, how to release it, and then let it go. If somebody else gave it to you, if you didn't decide this pressure, if you didn't choose it, if you didn't come up with it yourself, if someone else gave it to you, you get to choose if you continue carrying it with you. And I hope that you just trust me enough to drop those wands and get out from under this pressure, because I promise it will set you free. There's the horn on that alarm. I mean, confirmation with the horn again. There it is again. Anyway, that's the podcast. The Walk On Podcast is a production of Walk On Productions. It is written, recorded, produced, and marketed by me and me alone. To support independent work like this, and like my chapbook Flight of the Final Girl, like my rolling out as we speak album Hard Pop, like my musical acoustic EP Mantra, you can do so by following along with my journey on social media. I'm Brit_that's_it on Instagram and TikTok, and I also have another Instagram and TikTok. The handle is at walkon_pod for the podcast content. You can book a tarot reading, an astrology reading, a mentorship service, a voice lesson with me. You can book me for your shows. I can read tarot. I can play guitar. I can sing. I can dance. I can strip. I am truly a Renaissance man, and you can have me do all manner of things for money. You can donate through Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, Apple Pay, any of those things if you enjoyed this content and you'd like to throw a little something my way. And mostly you can just continue listening. You can subscribe to my Substack. You can join my newsletter. All of that stuff is at the link in my various bios. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for doing the work. Happy healing. Until next time. Bye.